whole journey, which was entrepreneurial in nature, has not been easy. Rewarding and fulfilling, absolutely. Like, we've monetized and we evolved from a radio show to a podcast and now a live streaming show. But when we started, it was because we did not see any representation when it came to young Black and brown voices talking about issues that really matter in our community.
What's up, ShineHard family? Welcome to a season 7 episode of the ShineHard Conversation series, where we sit down with the nation's top Black millennial leaders to educate, inspire, unify, and mobilize the next generation of Black wealth builders. At ShineHard, our mission is to close the racial wealth gap, and we do that by helping you discover the wealth that you already possess. Our Legacy Accelerator course is now open for enrollment. We're completing cohort 1 and rolling into cohort 2 in October. If you're interested in learning about the 8 forms of wealth, you should definitely tap in. Check our website, shinehardfamily.org, for more information, and you can join the community at a much deeper level and start building wealth for yourself and your family. Today, I'm here with an award-winning journalist, the Deputy Digital Editor for Black Enterprise, Miss Selena Hill. Very happy to have you here. Selena is also the founder and co-host of Be Heard Talk, which is a political podcast covering various aspects of Black culture. And she is an advocate for Black voices. She's been in media for over 10 years. And I'm very excited to hear her thoughts around information and money mindset for Black millennials or Black Americans in this modern era. So happy to have you here, Selena. How are you? How are you feeling?
Hey, Johnny, I am doing well. I'm happy to be here with the ShineHard family. Much love to you and your family as well.
Yeah, we go back a long way. I think you were at our ShineHard Summit in 2019 before the pandemic hit.
Yes, it was one of the last precious memories I had being in DC. And I was able to attend the summit, and it was great. I met so many great people there, still keep in contact with.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're now here full circle for ShineHard Conversation. And without further ado, it's time to shine. And it's become clear that, for me, passionate people come from all different backgrounds. And we don't always know from Instagram or social media how someone got to where they are today. So I like to kind of peel back the layers and dive in a little deep with my guests here. Tell us more about, your upbringing and what growing up was like for you.
Sure. So I grew up as an only child. And my parents divorced when I was maybe separated and then divorced when I was like 3 or 4. So I ended up spending some of my formative years in White Plains, New York, which is in Westchester. After that, ended up moving. Well, I'm originally from New York. My family lives all around the 5 boroughs. A lot of us live in Queens. We ended up moving.
You have that deep New York accent. I can hear
it. Okay, yeah, no, feel free to stop me when I mispronounce words like water and walk. Okay, I'm working on it. I'll work it on it. That was me being intentional, trying to say those words correctly. Okay, so I don't even know if I did it just now.
Okay, I won't stop you. Just be yourself.
Okay. So yeah, so I spent came back, lived in Queens with my mom, and she was phenomenal, did the best she could. I went to private school in junior high school, public school for for high school. And then when it came to college, I applied for 13 colleges, got accepted to 12. And it just so happens that my mom was working for WorldCom at the time. And there was a huge national scandal with the CEO of the company who was stealing from their employees. So my college fund was depleted. So I don't want to say I ended up, but I went to a state school. Shout out to SUNY Westbury. because of what happened. You know, my dream of going to Howard and Hampton didn't work out, but we always say SUNY Westbury is the HBCU of all the SUNY colleges. And, you know, I ended up, it is, no, like the campus is very diverse, very Black. And so I ended up going there in Long Island and flourished. I met, you know, so many great people. I ended up doing so many great things on campus. I'm still so connected to my school, my alma mater. And, you know, I still work with them. And, you know, it became a blessing in disguise. When I graduated, I won the President's Medal under Reverend Calvin Butts. He was president of the school at that time. And that's where I really started my career in media. It was working at the newspaper, working at the college radio station, working for the student government. And I just, you know, started there.
So we have some similarities in our upbringing because I'm an only child.
Okay.
And my parents separated when I was 1 year old. And I spent a lot of time with my mom and kind of bouncing all around with my family, my dad, my grandmother, my aunts. And from that, I think I spent the most time with my grandmother, who by that time, when I was maybe 6 or 7, she was retired and living on a fixed income. And that really affected my money mindset because she had a fixed mindset on how money worked. And that gave me kind of a fixed mindset and maybe a mindset of lack in a lot of ways as I was growing up. In a lot of Black families, it's taboo to talk about money. So how did you growing up with a single mom affect your money mindset growing up as a kid?
Similar to you, Johnny, my grandmother also played a pivotal role in my life. And she was retired by the time I was like 6. So at the time, she was receiving Social Security and a pension. And because of that, she was still very generous in giving. She far from rich or wealthy, but she had enough to help us out. And I do think that, you know, I remember her taking me shopping and doing things and spending time with me. And I remember like we would count the quarters when we would get on the bus. So I do think that they sort of implanted that mindset in me very early. But my mom and my grandmother could only teach me as much as they knew for themselves. And I feel like through that lens, I always understood the importance of giving back, of donating, whether that's to charity or just tithing at the church. That was something I was instilled very early. But I would say like one of the most important things that I realized was my grandmother's house was fully paid for. And having that asset has always been something that we as a family know is an asset, right? We always had like that foundation. The house was what, $13,000, $19,000 when it was purchased, and today
in New York. Wow. And today it's worth probably $1 million.
Half a million. So, and that's a rough estimate. So just having those principles, I learned ownership from her. Like my grandmother was a landlord. So what she did was she rented out the top, and that was also how she generated revenue. So I kind of saw her as like, again, not someone who lived a very like tight life. It was like, there was always,
she lived in abundance.
Yes, but it wasn't like we were wealthy or rich, but she felt like she had enough to give to the whole family.
Right. And she was an owner.
Yes.
She owned her property, and then she leveraged that property to become a producer to create more streams of income. And now she has that property as an asset, and that financial literacy rubbed off. Right.
Yes.
So now you're thinking about like, wow, okay, I see how that happened, how that worked. How does that affect you and your money mindset today as a young adult?
Absolutely. So it has affected me because I always know that not only do I aspire, like I've taken home buyers classes. It's always been in my immediate goals, right? To buy. I've placed bids on properties. Unfortunately, nothing has come through as of yet. but it has always been ingrained in me that not only do you want to buy, but having a multi-family unit and property and just seeing that revenue come in and sustain and help out the rest of the family was imparted in me very early on. So that's something that is an immediate goal of mine. And I've understood that. I think that with my grandmother and my family, they didn't always articulate, right? But they set the example. So
Right.
and I know we'll talk about Black enterprise, but just working at Black enterprise and interview entrepreneurs like you, Johnny, and other folks and who understand financial literacy, that really helped me sort of put all the pieces together so that I can shape the life that I want to build.
Absolutely, same. And from doing conversations with people like you and all of the hundreds of leaders and influencers that I've sat down with, I have learned so much. And I've been able to really just measure myself against some of the people that I'm sitting down with and then be inspired and say, okay, they were here. We come from the same area. They're here. Okay, let me, now I got to step my game up, right? Like it's always very motivating and inspiring to sit down with people who are just crushing it, living at the cutting edge of their potential. And that's what I want to surround myself with. That's what the ShineHard family really is all about. And so I'm glad to have someone like you as a part of the family through this conversation. But you talked about journalism when you were at the HBCU of New York, of the SUNYs, and you studied journalism there, right?
Yes.
So did you always know that this was a talent or an interest for you? And, what was your goal, in college about thinking about digital media and the future of your career?
Well, I think sometime, well, in our college, and I think in a lot of educational spaces, some of the data is antiquated. They don't keep up with the time. So I did not really learn digital media until after I left. Like we were still learning radio and television. But however, my goal at the time was always to create impact, to inform, educate, and empower marginalized communities. And, not only does that mean politically and civically, but also financially. And that sort of came later on, again, through working at Black Enterprise and some other outlets that put a major focus on economic empowerment. So that is really what opened up my eyes to realize that we have to prosper as a community in all three ways, right? We have to understand why it's important to vote, why it's important to get involved civically, but also the power of our dollar, buying Black and supporting our own businesses.
Absolutely. And I know Black Enterprise is at the forefront of economic empowerment for Black media. And it's a publication that has inspired me to create my own platform through ShineHard Conversations. Even as a young kid, when I was interning, maybe right after college, I was interning at a sports agency. And the agent that I worked for had his 40 under 40 Black Enterprise plaque. Like it was framed on the wall. And I used to look at it. I'm like, one day I'm going to be Black Enterprise 40 under 40. I was like 22 and I'm like, I'm going to be up there on that wall and get that award. So ever since then, I've always been like very enamored and followed closely Black Enterprise. And even Earl Graves, John H. Johnson, those brothers are major inspirations as well, because media is so important when you think about creating awareness and information, and even taking it back 50 years prior to them, Ida B. Wells. These pioneers are really shaping and telling stories that would have otherwise been untold. So I think that it's extremely important to have media outlets and have journalists like you. Tell us more about the mission of Black Enterprise and how your role supports that effort.
Absolutely. I mean, you did a great job talking about it yourself. Black Enterprise is a legacy company. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last year, and it was really built on Earl Graves' mission to inform and educate African Americans when it comes to economic advancement. So that means not only through financial literacy, but through careers, through leadership, and also through corporations. So throughout the last 50 years, what we've done is we've identified corporate leaders and stars who have gone on to run Fortune 500 companies. We do a number of events to amplify the messages and to also really just connect with African Americans and in the business community and allow them to connect with one another so that we can continue to advance together. And now with my role, this is what I've been told. People say like, oh, you're the digital face of Black enterprise. You're the
You are
millennial
becoming that.
voice. Huh?
You are becoming that. I feel like I see you more than anyone else representing Black enterprise, but go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish.
So that's what I've been told. I know that for me, even before I started working at Black enterprise, I've always had my feet on the ground. I've always been like well connected and steeped in culture.
Where did you start?
I started at a smaller Black owned company. It was called Envy Magazine. At the time here in New York. I went on to write for the New York Amsterdam News, which is the longest Black owned newspaper in the nation. I went on to work for Global Grind, which was under Russell Simmons at the time. A lot of minority owned outlets and publications. I did spend some years working at WOR 710 radio as well in New York, which is probably one of the only white-owned outlets I've ever worked for.
And then starting at Black Enterprise, where was your entry point?
Oh, I started as a freelance researcher in the freelance department. And in 6 months, I was promoted to assistant digital editor. And then 6 months from that date, I was promoted to digital editor. And then in April of 2021, I was promoted to deputy digital editor.
Wow. So you really worked your way up and started from the bottom. Now you're here.
Yeah, right. Just to quote Drake.
So do you feel like digital media is an easy business for entrepreneurs or creators to get into?
No, I don't. And the reason why I say no like that is because so outside of Black Enterprise, you mentioned Be Heard Talk in my introduction. That was the radio show that I started in college, took a hiatus, and then have been doing professionally with a core team of other folks, right, who work in media or have some part in media. And that whole journey, which was entrepreneurial in nature, has not been easy. Rewarding and fulfilling, absolutely. Like we've monetized and we evolved from a radio show to a podcast and now a live streaming show. But when we started, it was because we did not see any representation when it came to young Black and brown voices talking about issues that really matter in our community. All we had was like CNN, MSNBC, cable, whatever, right? Now, today, everyone, has a podcast. Everyone has a YouTube channel. Everyone is in this space and everyone is producing content. In fact, the creator economy is one of the biggest booming economies in the last decade. It's doing phenomenal. So it's harder to, I think, sort of rise above the noise. So I would say, for anyone in the digital media landscape, that you have to, for me, I would say understand your market, understand your target, and understand your goals, and be willing to evolve with the times and re-strategize and recalibrate, because this market is changing so quick. This industry is changing so quickly. And to me, you have to always be on the cusp of what's next.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I feel like we've had to reimagine our organization in some regards, and also just refine our platform as a media platform. And so how do we disseminate information? We have our website, we have YouTube, and now we're like, maybe we should be on a podcast, right? Like, why not just repackage this conversation on audio? And you're right, you have to constantly be evolving because the industry is rapidly changing. Even social media and the way that we use technology is ever evolving. So that digital piece is just one of those elements that people have to embrace change ever and often.
And just to add on to that question about digital media, I did a recent interview with the founder of the Shade Room, and the Shade Room is a unicorn, right? She created this. I believe she told me it was 2014 or 2016. I'm mixing the dates up, but
Mm-hmm.
she started posting, and within days gained a following. Within weeks, within months, she had like 500,000 followers or something like that. And that was before I think Instagram really blew up into what
Right.
it is.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's like
there's
when,
a lot of people that
yes,
really could capitalize on the nascent nature of Instagram when it was really chronological feed,
yep,
and all your followers saw your post, and you could literally gain traction with anything, right? Like you didn't have to beat the algorithm, you didn't have to pay to play. And there's people who are on Instagram now, come to legacy accounts that have a lot of followers that don't even really play in this new game. Even me, like I feel like I got my 30K before it started getting confusing. And I'm just gonna be like, I'm chilling. I'm good. I don't want to have to play this game as much. Reels is too much for me.
yeah, that it's no, you're right. And that's how she capitalized. And the reason why the Shade Room is still here, if you ask me, is because they have continued to evolve and they developed a community. They were one of the first outlets. Like you have the ShineHard community, right? People who were following the Shade Room were calling themselves the roommates years ago. And to this day, they use that hashtag, and she has ventured out. So, when I was listening to her tell her story, I was in awe because a lot of it is also timing. Like you can
Mm,
be skillful, you can be talented, you can keep your ear to the ground, but it's getting in at the right time for a
yeah,
lot, especially when it comes to social media.
absolutely. I think that is spot on. And I literally feel like I use social media to build my personal brand and to build this platform. And I'm glad that I got in before it became oversaturated, because now I don't need to rely on social media as much in order for us to run our Legacy Accelerator course, add value to our membership community, to generate revenue through our annual conference. And it's really a timing thing, right? Because had I been coming out right now, it would be a whole different ballgame as how I grow my following and bring a community to market. So you're absolutely right. And thinking about our Legacy Accelerator course, we, as I mentioned, help Black Americans discover the 8 forms of wealth. And one of those forms of wealth is information. And the way I position information is really like knowing financial literacy, knowing etiquette socially as a group or a race, and then also like rights, laws, and policies. Because many of us as citizens of this country don't even fully understand our rights as as individuals here, and therefore we become intimidated or taken advantage of in the legal and the justice system. How important do you feel like social justice is to economic empowerment? Like, what's the order, and how do you approach those when you're thinking about that type of content at Black Enterprise?
That's a great question, Johnny. I think social justice and economic empowerment go hand in hand, especially for the Black community here in America. I think that when it comes to our advancement, we can't do so in this system of capitalism without our own capital, without circulating the dollar. And to your point, Black enterprise has always been pivotal when it comes to disseminating that information to our community and aspiring generations of folks to become entrepreneurs, to become owners. Even if you don't want to own a business, own a property, own a LLC, just have something that you can pass down and leave a legacy to our
Mhm.
children, because
Own your domain
absolutely.
name.
Mm-hmm. What'd you say? Oh, your
Own your
domain.
Yeah.
Apps, intellectual property, own something. And then that's a message that we've definitely been key to. And I think that also with my podcast, Be Her Talk, which I'm very fortunate that Black Enterprise actually picked up and streams. I was doing it before Black Enterprise, and now they further amplified our message there. Oh, thank you. We've always been talking about these issues, race, politics, and culture, and how they all interside. because we cannot have, like, wealth is, when you say wealth is a mindset, that's because it starts in the mind, right? How we perceive money, right? Even I was thinking to myself the other day, when I hear some of like my friends, or they say things like, oh, that's for, I'm not rich, or that's for the rich folks and stuff like that. I don't have that mindset anymore, because I'm like, hold on, why would you put yourself in a class? Money flows, right? It's a current. And if you have access to, building it, then you have access to different things and resources. But I think a lot of us in our community, because we grow up under resourced, we automatically say, that's not for me. I could never be that. That's for them. That's for the rich folks. And I'm like, no, we have to really understand how money works and operates, and how we can get it to work for us.
Mm-hmm. So you think about breaking the chains in the physical sense. We also have to break the mental chains, that we are a second-class citizen, or that we are subordinate to other classes or other races, right? And like in one of our modules, our first module is all about designing yourself. And we want to reshape our habits, our goals, and our mindset. You hit the nail on the head when you said wealth is a mindset, because you have to become a millionaire in your mind, in your behavior, before you attract the money. I set a goal in 2013. I set a goal to become a millionaire. And it wasn't for the money. It was for the type of person that I would need to become in order to become a millionaire.
Wow.
And that energy has brought me to this conversation right here with you, and all the things that come along with that.
That's amazing, Johnny. And when it really, that sort of reminds me of like the power of manifestation, because it starts with the visual. And I remember I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, Ash Cash, who huge financial literacy advocate, has been profiled, in Black Enterprise a number of times. And, in his book about money being a mindset, he writes about how he started off, when he wanted to become a millionaire, he started attracting a lot of millionaires, but it took that extra oomph to really understand how money works so that he could become it, right? Because I think that whatever it is that we envision ourselves to be, we will attract, right? And we will become that, but it also takes a certain amount of discipline, work, and education and understanding as well.
Absolutely. And we talk about that in the ShineHard family. Is there's 3 ways to become a full participant in the economy. You can become a consumer, which Black people historically are very good at that. You can become a producer, and you can become an investor. So we want to really diversify our participation in the economy. And we also say there's 4 levels of financial wellness: financial dignity, financial security, financial independence, and financial freedom. And when you think about your circles and people we hang around, we need to hang around people who have the level of financial wellness that we're looking to attract or acquire for ourselves, right? So if you have financial security, great. Hang out with some people who have financial independence. Start going where they are, do what they're doing. When you get to financial independence, start hanging out with people who have financial freedom. What type of multifamily properties do they own? What type of businesses are they owning? How are they diversifying their portfolio so that you can now move into that level of financial wellness? Do you feel like it's important for Black Americans to be entrepreneurs, or do you feel like some people can become financially well off without having their own stream of income that they own?
It depends on how well off, however they define that, or success. But absolutely, I do think that Black Americans can become wealthy or obtain a certain amount of wealth through other avenues besides entrepreneurship, particularly corporate America. It does have some reservations, or so it can have some limitations, but I know, been mentored or interviewed so many corporate leaders who are Black that are doing well, and they've taken that income and they've invested it in properties. They have a diverse portfolio in the stock, etc. They're invested in Bitcoin, whatever it is. So I think entrepreneurship is one stream or vehicle to wealth, absolutely, but I don't think it's the only stream.
Right. I think it's not how much you earn, but more so what you do with what you
With
earn.
your earnings, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. Yep. So from your work as a host and producer in hundreds of interviews, I mean, you've sat down with celebrities, CEOs, just hustlers. What have you found to be the greatest need for Black Americans?
I think it always goes back to just information. I think that, you and I, Johnny, and a lot of the folks who are watching this, we've been privileged to access to access of information. But when I go back to certain communities, whether I'm speaking at schools or even just like the connections within my own family, they don't have that same access to information, which limits them and their ability to live out to their fullest potential and, live out to their highest earning power. Not only is it information, but it's just exposure, right? They don't know what's out there. And with limited exposure, they develop a limited self-belief system about themselves. So that's why, again, if you're asking me as a journalist, it's always information, which is why my mission in life, as well as with my show, is to inform, educate, empower. And it starts with inform, because that's one of the keys needed for, I think, advancement as a community.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I love that millennials have technology under our belt to a certain extent, because we live in the technological era where there's so much information available. And I believe that the information is what makes us different from previous generations, in the sense of like, we don't just follow the status quo, and we are really slammed with student debt. So we already have different problems than y'all had, but we also have so much more information. So we can be like, okay, this is the truth. So I'm not going to believe what anyone just tells me. Okay, here's how I can go on YouTube and just build something, or here's how I can learn a skill, and I can diversify, or I can pivot my career. And I love that about our generation, because there's so much information that can be used and leveraged to, one, better position ourselves in society, but also create income, which can be used to create wealth. I believe social justice is a byproduct of economic empowerment. Once we create an independent economy, once you can amass a level of wealth and ownership in your community, in your state, then you have a voice. Now you can affect decisions and policies that are happening. That is really the process. And I've read a book called Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson. He's one of my virtual mentors. I've read so many of his books, and he just lays out the infrastructure for community empowerment. And he had a goal of kind of closing the wealth gap by 2005. He wrote a book in maybe like the 90s, and he had a 15-year goal. And I don't think it came into fruition, but the book came into my hands. The book is coming to your hands. And we are the leaders of right now. So we can take his research and his message and his philosophies, and now we can apply it to the modern day Black American, and can kind of continue that mission in hopes of actually, really moving the needle for the next generation.
That's fascinating. And I really like how you structured economic advancement as a byproduct of social justice, or maybe you said it the other way around.
Vice versa.
Right, vice versa. I think that's fascinating. I do think that all three components, again, like politics and civic engagement, and economic advancement, work hand in hand. I do think that, but I agree that you cannot have one without the other. Absolutely not in this system that's set up. This system obviously wasn't designed for Black folks, but we are more empowered than ever before to advance within this system, regardless of the limitations that come with it, the stigmas and the oppression.
Yeah. And the societal winds are trending in the right direction.
Yes.
Ever so subtly and slowly. But hey, if we can secure a bag from a corporate sponsor, if we can get a promotion, if we can be a part of this ERG now that can make a difference for more Black candidates that can get hired, then all the better, right? Like, it's not, change isn't going to be pretty and comfortable. Sometimes it's ugly and rude in a sense, but hey, let's take it and let's progress. So a question that I ask every single leader that comes on this platform is about passion, because we believe that passion changes everything. And if you start to tap into your passion, it will lead you to your purpose. You've been working in digital media and in this space since your college days. So to me, it's clear that you are walking in something that's aligned. What would you say is your passion, and when did you know?
My passion, it all goes back to informing, educating, and empowering my community. And I knew that when I was a little girl, or maybe a teenager at that. So my parents were divorced. My father, he went on to, he had another child. And I just saw the big difference in how I was growing up and the resources that I had access to. Not a lot, but much more. And it affected me so much just seeing that firsthand. Excuse me. Just seeing how, we talk about generational wealth. We don't talk enough about generational poverty. And when I saw generational poverty firsthand and saw how cyclical it was, I was so moved that, my college admission essay was about changing the world, because I was so upset that any child had to grow up impoverished, whether they were in my family or not. And I wanted to make changes. So that is where the passion stems from. And it just so happens, thanks be to God, that I developed vehicles to express that, my voice through writing, my voice through my radio show, now my podcast, everything I do on camera, the work being aligned with Black enterprise and the other outlets that I've done. That has always been my passion.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your greatest fear?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. It's a good question, Johnny. My greatest fear, not to sound cliche, I don't know if I let fear stop me too much. I've developed, earlier in my career, a lot of my friends and colleagues said, particularly Stanley Fritz, who I've worked on my show with for years, he says, Selena, you're a star and everyone sees it and knows it. Everyone knew it except for me. And now that I have decided to believe that and to lean in, I'm at the point where I'm just like, I don't think there's nothing that I cannot do. If anything scares me or is fearful, it's maybe the success, right? Like, because with success, a lot of times, especially for those in our community, it comes with massive changes, right? Our families do not live, in Beverly Hills. So that means that's a huge shift in my life. So maybe just how big my dreams can be. Maybe that is something that I could say I would be fearful of, but other than that, I don't know.
No, that makes good sense. I mean, for me, it's like my only fear is like mediocrity of having so much potential and talent and being like, at the end of my life, looking back and being like, you squandered, I have to talk to God and God's going to say, you squandered all that I gave you. That, like, to me, that's one of my biggest fears. So I'm like pounding the pavement every single day, trying to go as far as I can in the little bit of time that I have. But that's a great answer though. So thinking about your dream, your big dream, how do you define success?
I define success as leaving a legacy of change that empowers other people. And I've developed that mantra years ago and I've stuck to it. That's how I see success. I do not see success as linear in, an amount of, yes, it comes in money form, but how is that money being used to help others? By example, by investment, eventually through philanthropy. So that is how I define success.
Oh, that's a good way. I think your value, if you help enough people get what they want, you can have everything that you want.
Beautifully said.
I imagine everyone on this call and everyone watching, really walking this earth, has once had a dream. Now I'll ask you, what do you feel separates those who have made their dream a reality and those who have not?
That is such a great question, Johnny. For me, the people that do not make their dreams a reality, from my observation, is a lack of discipline and a lack of self-belief. And a lot of times people do not practice the discipline needed to realize their dreams because they don't believe in themselves in the first place. So if you don't believe you can do it and that you'll reach the dream, why dedicate X number of hours a day into realizing it, as opposed to living either mediocre or just living out the norm that was created for you, right? No matter the environment that you're put in, that becomes your norm. And if you want to leave it or excel beyond it, it's going to take a lot of mental energy and a lot of labor. But in order to have the ability to put that amount of work in, you have to know and believe that it was meant for you to be there and that you can do it. And I love that question because there are a lot of people along my journey that, and I've seen a lot who are ambitious, but those dreams aren't realized. I've seen a lot who maybe have a dream, but it flounders, and then I've met some of, the most successful people, that we see. And I see what separates, and that's the conclusion I've came to.
No, that's deep and profound. I think about what you said reminds me of what Steve Jobs said in one of his interviews. And I'm gonna paraphrase because I can't remember it verbatim, but the gist of it was that everything that is around us was created by someone. It was someone's idea. It was a thought. Someone imagined it, and then they decided to go and build it. And we're born into a world where we feel like this is our reality. And somewhere along the line, many of us feel like this is how it is. This is how it always will be. Mm-hmm. But what really is the shift is you realize this is how it is, but anyone can change it. I can just shift it. I can poke a hole through and something comes out on the other end. Mm-hmm. And when you realize that, like, you really design yourself and you can shape your own reality and you can really shape the reality for many people, then you take ownership. And that was what it was for me. Is like in my 20s, I started to see like I can shape a narrative by telling stories. I can shape my own personal brand by telling stories of my own life and like amplifying my own voice. And that, when I started seeing traction and people would receive me a certain way, or I got opportunities, or I was being recognized, then I became more motivated because I'm like, okay, this formula is working. I'm able to affect change. I'm inspiring people. I'm getting the feedback. This is something that's working. Let's keep doing it and do more. And it wasn't even about money. Like you said, it wasn't a financial goal. It was like an impact goal. And I knew if I could just keep impacting year over year, eventually the money would come somehow. I'd be financially stable somehow. But like, let's worry about the impact and how you can measure your impact at the end of all of this.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
It's been good. You're easy to talk to. I feel like you're interviewing me.
You know what? Because I do, no, you're easy to talk to too, but because I do interviews all the time, I'm actually feel more comfortable doing the interviewing and asking questions and listening. Despite being a talk show host, and I really enjoy actually listening to really dope folks like yourself and hearing your journey.
No, I appreciate that. So here's a last question that I really want you to drive this home and give us some gems that we can take away from this conversation, because you have done amazing things in your short time as a digital journalist, and you've been able to sit down with people who we're inspired by, who we idolize, who we aspire to be like. And I'm sure many of that juice and mojo has spilled over into you, and now you're becoming that person that we aspire to be. What advice do you have for young journalists, young Black Americans on how to be successful in the 21st century? What's the mindset?
That's an excellent question, Johnny. I would say definitely it goes back to self-belief, understanding your God-given gifts and talents, realizing those and identifying those. And if you haven't already, ask the folks around you because they see it. And hopefully they can articulate and encourage you to develop those gifts and talents, and then putting in the work, doing the research. Like, are you a skilled carpenter? Are you skilled at digital strategy and marketing? Are you skilled at building things, whether that's a startup company or maybe something tangible? Whatever it is, do the work to perfect that. And then also research how you can monetize it. Because I also think for, a lot of, especially creatives and Black creatives, we're so dedicated, and myself included, so dedicated to the art and the mission and the impact. And we forget that we can't do anything if we're not feeding ourselves first. So in order to be impactful, we have to be fully fed physically, financially, spiritually, and mentally. So putting in that work and effort into ourselves first to make sure that we are stable. And then that's how you become a blessing to others. And again, that goes back to my grandmother, who was full. She was not a rich woman, but she had enough to give. And whether that was physically or just the example she set, she gave so much.
Her cup runneth over.
Yes.
And that mindset of abundance has definitely been inherited by you, Selena. And I'm so glad you could join us for this conversation. It's been very informative, very inspiring. Hope everyone took some gems, took some notes, and will reach out to you. Let everyone know how they can find you online.
Absolutely. You can find me MissSelenaHill.com. Miss is spelled with an MS. You can also follow me on social media at Miss Selena Hill. Again, that's at Miss MS Selena Hill.
Awesome. And if you enjoyed this conversation, you should check out the Legacy Accelerator course. It's an 8-week online course where we help you discover the wealth that you already possess. Visit the website to learn more, ShineHardFamily.org. If you want to connect with me, I'm at One Johnny Bailey on all platforms. And of course, follow the ShineHard Family movement at ShineHard Family. Looking forward to connecting with you all. Remember, we are the leaders of right now. See you all next week. Have a good week. Peace.